Western region. Um, so I'm really excited for y'all to be here and hear this great lineup that we have. So without further ado, so we can make this hour count, I'm going to have our first person start us off, and her name is Alyssa. And a little bit about Alyssa is she joined the Fair Trade Federation as the membership manager in 2020. She's also the chair of the Lancaster Human Relations Commission Advisory Council, an active member of the Lancaster Global Shapers Hub, and a member of the Climate Reality Leadership Corps. Wow, so much. She's a rock star, and there's more to come. She has been in the nonprofit sector for the majority of her career, both with agency of choice and organization dedicated to assisting individuals in selecting their own care providers, and the Church World Service, where she served as a resettlement case manager in the Refugee Resettlement Program. Her passion is fair trade. Passion for fair trade was cultivated throughout her years of working with these vulnerable populations and advocating for human rights issues across and sustainable practices, both in her professional and personal life. She earned her BA in International Studies with a minor in French from Millersville University. So let's welcome Alyssa and hear a little bit about her.
Thank you, Jasmine. Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. So yeah, I am the membership manager at the Fair Trade Federation. That was really my introduction into fair trade was when I started with the FTF, and it's been really wonderful and eye-opening. So, I would say a lot of that work that I've done previously as a resettlement case manager in refugee resettlement really comes hand in hand with a lot of the work in fair trade and the ideologies within fair trade. But so since I've been with the FTF, I also joined the national leadership team for fair trade campaigns, which has been wonderful. We're working on our campaign for Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and we passed a fair trade resolution with our city council, which was our first kind of check off on the list as a fair trade towns campaign. And that was in October of 2021. We wanted to do it in line with Fair Trade Month. So that was kind of a great accomplishment of ours. And yeah, just in general, this past couple of years I've spent with the FTF, I've seen some really great work we've done with our JEDI committee, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, particularly made some really exciting changes to our code of practice in terms of informed consent and in terms of, questioning not just what empowerment is, but the way we talk about empowerment. So that's, something that I think really stirred with me when I was invited to speak here today, just, how we even think about empowerment in terms of the different people involved within fair trade. So yeah, I'll kind of leave it there, but I'm really excited to be here and hearing from all the other great speakers we have today.
Great. Thank you so much, Alyssa. I'm really excited to have you on the call and to kind of pick your brain a little bit later in the call during the Q&A section. Let me go ahead and pull up our next speaker. I can pull up the right thing. There it is. Okay. Next, we have Alyssa. Alyssa is a junior at Whitney Young Magnet High School, and is part of their fair trade campaign, which was designated in 2019. She's passionate about fair trade and educating people about the cause, and believes that we should constantly be making the world a better place and everyone in it. Being involved with fair trade is a great way to do that. And I think we will also, during a little bit later during the Q&A, we'll also hear from some of the fellow campaigners at Whitney Young. And it's so exciting to have them on this call, just seeing the new generation rise up. So I would love to hear a little bit more from Alyssa, or I'm sorry, Ava. I'm sorry, there we go.
Hi, so I'm Ava. I am a junior at Whitney Young, as you said, and I'm on the executive board of the Fair Trade Club at our school. And I did not know a lot about fair trade at all before I got to high school. And then we had Nazreen come and speak at our school, I would say 2-3 years ago. And that just really opened my eyes to everything that's going on and how much I was contributing to hardships for so many people. And so it's just been very interesting learning more about it and getting people's firsthand experiences, and also educating people about the cause, because so many people are just kind of oblivious to what is going on. So I'm just really passionate about it and teaching other people about fair trade.
That's awesome, Ava. It's so good to see someone at your age be so involved and passionate about a topic like fair trade. So glad to have you. Glad to have you and your team on this call. I'm just moving through these so that we can just like have as much time as possible to like ask all these phenomenal women all the questions. So next, and there's a bunch of A's, so apologies on me getting all mixed up. But next we have Aime, Aime Medina, who graduated with a degree in communications from the National Autonomous University of Mexico with a specialization in organizational communication and science journalism. She has been leveraging her expertise over the last 7 years in her international social enterprises and nonprofit organizations. She has focused her efforts in empowering farmers and protecting their environment, the environment globally. Her passion to change the narrative about how we understand the challenges of farmers and her passion is to change the narrative of how we understand the challenges of farmers and farm workers. Led her to listen to their stories and look for different ways to communicate to them from a different perspective of empowerment and rather than predetermined Western stereotypes. She's currently on the Impact Research and Learning team here at Fairtrade USA and is responsible for coordinating research at the producer level to better understand the impact that our Fairtrade program is creating in their lives. So let's welcome Aime.
Hi. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here today. Well, with what I do at Fairtrade is, as I mentioned, well, Jasmine mentioned, I'm part of the Impact Research and Learning team. And to be more specific, what I do is that I coordinate research with the different producers and farmers and factories we work with to monitor and evaluate the impact of Fairtrade USA. As a team, we work a lot like setting the objectives of the research with the rest of the teams at Fairtrade USA, but then we design the tools and methodologies to collect information on site or remotely in the different farms or locations we work. And when we create that tools, a very important part of my job is to understand the context, translate, review, and be in close contact with the people that are in charge of the fair trade certification on each farm or factory to understand, for example, if they have a very high migrant population, or if we need to include translators during our research process, at which stage the program they are, in which premium projects they are working on. And this is very important for us because that's how we can have a clear image of what's happening at the farm and understand what questions we can do, where we can go deeper in the research. And then when everything's ready, we're ready to launch the research process remotely on site. And there's when we start with the interviews, focus groups, and surveys, which is definitely my favorite part. I feel really lucky to have the opportunity to hear the stories of the farmers and workers and understand where the program is working and where probably is not working, and we need to improve. That's what I do at Fairtrade.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're on this call, Aime, and it's so good to have folks that are coming from all perspectives of the fair trade movement. And your job is super important because we get to learn exactly what's working with fair trade and what's not, and directly from the farmers. So that's really cool. Last but certainly not least for introductions is Sara. She is an award-winning beverage creator, TEDx speaker, and founding CEO of Sarilla. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. A social enterprise with 2 fair trade certified product lines, including a sparkling non-alcoholic beverage and a loose leaf tea. She has been partnering with the people of Rwanda since 2007, sourcing premium grade Camellia sinensis tea from a farmer-owned cooperative, and now growing their own botanicals of Uzbima Healing Garden on the Uzbima Healing Garden farm using regenerative agricultural methods. Sara has been leading the curated crop to cup tours in East Africa since 2012. And before launching, Sarilla founded a nonprofit that serves women with a history of trauma called Africa Healing Exchange. Sara was the first national coordinator of Fair Trade Towns and helped to launch the Fair Trade University program back in 2007. She led the campaign for Fair Trade Brattleboro in Vermont, and she currently lives in Asheville, North Carolina with her family. So let's give a warm welcome to Sara.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the intro. That was lovely. You covered it all 20 years in my career. It's great to see everyone again. It's been a while since I've been on one of these calls, and I've just had an amazing journey with Fair Trade. As Jasmine mentioned, I worked on some campaigns in my 20s, and now to be the owner of a brand is just really incredible. I didn't predict this when I was doing the activism work in my 20s. I've just been very passionate about fair trade since actually doing my first graduate school internship in my 20s. I worked for a clothing company called Kusikwi, which was in Vermont, and they worked with Bolivian weavers, and that introduced me to the importance of fair trade. And so it's really living in Rwanda and spending a year working there on the ground with farmers and weavers just completely changed my life and helped me find a greater sense of myself and purpose. And so I'm building this business as a social enterprise in partnership with a nonprofit foundation that we still have. And I'm just really grateful to you all and the important service work that you're doing to help make the world a brighter place. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. That was really great. We're just gonna kind of ask you guys a couple questions that we have. Some are directed to everyone and some are directed to just a couple. But just to start off, this is for everyone. What does empowerment look like for women, and how does fair trade tie into that? Feel free for our speakers to come off mute whenever and answer.
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
It's Sara.
Sorry, you can go.
Okay. So yeah, I love this question. I think that often the terminology like to empower someone else is used in the wrong way. Personally, I don't believe that we can empower anyone else. And the lessons that I get working with women in Rwanda is that we all have the power that we need inside of us, and we are born with it. But certain things can happen along the way in our journey that makes us feel disempowered. Certainly traumas, certainly poverty, certainly different events and cultures of family units can create a disempowering feeling. And so the work that I really love to do is to show up for people, to hold space for other women so that they can start to see their own power and actually take charge of their own life. So I think empowerment is really when we're able to tap into our true self and use our voice in its fullest capacity and feel safe enough to be able to do that, to feel safe enough to be able to speak our truth in our environment and actually be ourselves and not try to be a chameleon according to what other people expect us to be.
I think that I agree with you, Sara. Oh, sorry. I think Ava, you were going to talk. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. For me, I think that empowerment for women is just individuality, because for so long it was like you're a wife or you're a mother, but it wasn't really like you're your own person. So I think that just the ability to choose your own paths in life is really important. And so what fair trade can do is give women jobs or an education if they couldn't get one, or just their own income to support themselves, their families if they have them. And I think it's like jobs especially give people a great feeling of like success, or they've done something. And so I think that opportunities like these that fair trade can provide to women can empower people to feel like they're their own individual person and can really just take care of themselves and use their voice, their ideas, and all of that good stuff.
Yes. Well, I was going to continue with the idea of Sara. I also agree a lot with that. And I think that one of the important things that fair trade is trying to do is to create safe spaces for women. Like there are a lot of things that are happening in the supply chains that make, well, in the world, even that make very unsafe for women to speak up or even have the chance to have the same tools as everybody else, to speak out of what their needs are or what they are feeling or things like that. And yeah, I think that fair trade is trying to first create that safe spaces for women at their work. And then as a second step, it is have more knowledge about their rights, about what they, yeah, like about their labor rights. And then they can start having more confidence and be aware that their opinions and their needs matter, and that they can be agents of change and take decisions to improve their families and their communities. And I think that's how how we empower women.
That's really well said, all three of you. So just to add, you've already said, pretty much it all, but to me, like empowerment really is the ability to advocate for yourself and for others and have the agency to act on that advocacy. So, like Aime was saying, like the ability to make your own choices and stand up for yourself. And, if something is happening that shouldn't be, the ability to speak out on it and act on it. And then, from the lens of fair trade, to me, it can look so many different ways depending on who you are within that fair trade sphere. So, as a producer, or, someone making products or on a farm, that's going to look a certain way in terms of your own empowerment. It's, to me, what we focus on a lot lately, because, I, as a person of privilege, like I'm not empowering anyone. Like what we as, being on this side of things, we're helping people and they are empowering themselves. We're not empowering them. So it's, using privilege, of course, certainly to provide that ability to other people. But it's important too, to recognize, that everyone essentially is their own source of empowerment. It's just, it's a different path depending on who you are.
Yeah, and great segue because we have a follow-up question. How have you been empowered or help empower women through your work? You might be, speaking what you just spoke again, but yeah, feel free to answer.
I think that one of the most important things that we as a team do is that every single time we visit a farm or farmer's house or factory, we always want to hear women. Sometimes they are very shy, even more shy than the rest of the workers or farmers. But we always try to find these spaces where they can feel comfortable to share their stories, because that's how we learn how the program is working or where it's not working. And then we can get back to all the certificate holders, the farms, our team, and the buyers. So we can create better ways to support them to feel more safe or have more tools or feel that they can speak.
I'll go ahead and share my experience in Rwanda. So we source most of our Cumulus donensis tea from the northern province of Rwanda from a company called Sorwate. There's actually two farmer cooperatives, Sorwate and Aesopte. They both can sell fair, we buy everything 100% fair trade certified, but they're also selling to other companies that are not necessarily paying the fair trade premium. But the factory and the farms themselves are certified and also organic and pesticide free. And so I have my experience working with them, and we've partnered with some female tea pluckers there to really build personal and direct relationships. But one thing I'm always mindful of how we're coming into a culture and possibly disrupting the norms within the culture. So even beyond fair trade, I think it's incredibly important. Like if we're traveling someplace or visiting someplace or paying someone extra. For example, I have a relationship with a woman named Beatrice, and she's one of the tea pluckers. And as much as I want to just like pour things on her and like pay for her children's school fees and all these things, like that's not appropriate either, right? Like that's not my place, and that could actually cause problems for her in her community if she's separated, because it's such a communal society. So I think there's like really strong cultural things to consider there as well when we pull people out and try to have conversations or build relationships with them. And I think it's also super important to have the buy-in from the men in the community or their husbands, so they don't feel threatened in some way. So now I'm working with a group of 55 women in the western province of Rwanda, and they used to be coffee farmers, and they weren't able to make a regular income with coffee farming because they could only harvest and sell once a year. So we've started an herbal tea company there. We're growing botanicals, and it's so rewarding to work with them because they're actually part owners in this business, and they're participating in the packaging and the marketing and the walking into, I'll never forget, like we walked into a cafe in Rwanda together. It was me and 5 of the women. And they had their packaged Ubuzima Healing Garden tea on the shelf there, and they were serving it in the cafe. And that moment, the women for the first time actually saw the finished product that they had grown, harvested, processed. There's nothing like it, because so often our producer partners aren't ever seeing that. Maybe they'll see a picture, but they're not usually experiencing that finished product excitement. So and again with them, like they're the leaders, they're the management, they're the owners, but we also wanted to make sure that we were offering programs for their husbands, that we really were building relationship with their husbands, although so many of them are widows. So we have other programs for them as well. Otherwise, we don't know what's going to happen when they get back home. Like the domestic violence rate is already high enough. And so those are things that we really take very seriously when we are attempting to be change agents, especially in a culture that we're not from.
Sorry about that. So I have taught other women about fair trade and the principles that go along with that through leadership in Fair Trade Club. It's just been very interesting to kind of like empower each other and just want to make a difference in that area, because no one really knows about it before that. We just bring attention to it, and we're all in very fortunate positions. We get a great education. We have so many other opportunities, but we also just kind of take for granted, I think, the fact that we can just be like regular teenagers, and we don't have to work this long job for long hours with low pay and bad conditions. And so it's just very interesting to share that with people, and to, I don't know, it just gives you like a reason to want to change that for other people, because that would be horrible. And I've also been able to hear about survivors of fast fashion and other industries, and Nazarene was a big one. I've heard from her a couple times, and it has just really made everything that we talk about. We have bi-weekly meetings, so we talk about this so much, and it just makes it really real, and it makes you want to work towards just fair trade and all those principles even more.
I think empowerment too can look so many different kinds of ways. So, it can be something as simple as just being supportive. So, like in so many places, throughout my career, I see women especially do that thing where, you sort of, if something was someone else's idea and then it gets brought up, they call it out and they support one another, and they kind of push other women up. And and provide platforms for them to be recognized. And, that's just one small way, of course. But, in terms of fair trade, when you're looking at it in terms of the supply chain, even something as small as making a fair trade purchase towards an organization that is doing those things in a much bigger way, and providing that kind of support and enabling women to empower themselves through the programs that they have and through the work they're providing, even that is in its own way a step towards empowerment and a way of participating in it in a smaller way.
Thank you guys, great answers. This is another question for everyone. What's it like being a woman in your field of work, and what barriers or issues have you come across in your line of work?
I'll go ahead. So in the US, I own a beverage company. I'm a beverage maker. I keg beverages. I go into bars and breweries and grocery stores. I meet with grocery chain buyers. I was at a trade show on Monday, and I'm in the Southeast. So we're often presenting to like very traditional grocery chain buyers for our products. Some of them are still confusing fair trade with free trade, which always gets me. I'm like, really, 20 years, you still don't know. So there's still amazingly an education that happens there. Every now and then I'll end up in a meeting with another woman, but it's mostly white men of a certain age. And so I would say, I have met a couple of other women who own beverage companies or breweries or are like major retail buyers for national grocery chains, but it's pretty rare. So it's still, it's still a lot needs to change. And I think the expectations need to change. And it's always fun, like getting onto a Zoom and then surprising people with who I really am behind the brand. And, when I was first getting started here in Asheville, so I have a very like emotionally supportive husband, but he's not part of my business. He's not a co-founder. He's not an investor. He's not like money bags. And whatever, people still assume like behind, behind a woman, a successful woman in business, there must be a husband or something. But a couple of times he's made deliveries or dropped product off someplace, and I'll hear back later. I heard from this business, it was a retailer, and they're like, "Oh, it was so nice to meet the owner of the company finally." And it just blew me away. So, I mean, there's still assumptions like that are made, but I absolutely love working with other women, other female entrepreneurs. We're starting to really collaborate more with college students as well, and developing a college ambassador program with young women. I just hired a new intern last week, and she's just inspiring me already. And so it's really encouraging to me to see how things are changing and to see how entrepreneurism is really like up and coming now with the younger generation, and that I feel like women aren't letting anything stop them anymore, at least in this country, in the US. So that's my experience so far. It hasn't discouraged me in any way. If anything, it's motivated me. But I guess too, when you get to that next level of looking at financing, investors, venture capital, which a lot of these brands really need to rely on as we grow, there's still only 2.3% of venture capital is going to women-owned companies in this country. And if you look behind the scenes on that, it's about the same number of venture capital partners who are female. So that's where, you keep peeling back the layers and look at the leadership and how those things really need to change in order for more women to get access to capital to grow their business and to compete with other big national and multinational brands, especially, brands with purpose, fair trade certified brands. Because luckily, I think that's where a lot of brands are headed. It's no longer the exception. I think it's really the expectation that we are fair trade.
I think just from my experience, just both with the FTF and fair trade campaigns, and previously when I was at Church World Service and Refugee Resettlement, it was a kind of a woman rich work environment, which I really enjoyed. Like for overwhelmingly throughout my career, the people that I was working with, as well as supervisors and people in charge of programs, were overwhelmingly women, and I think that it is in general maybe a different communication style that for us was really cohesive and worked really well, and kind of brought forth like the idea of holding each other up and raising each other versus any type of competition or anything like that. Yeah, I love women rich work culture as well, Catherine. But yeah, so in terms of barriers and challenges, I think with the way fair trade is moving forward, as Sara was kind of pointing out, there are still, I think, a lot of, especially with like really established fair trade organizations who have been around a really long time, the way things are moving forward in terms of, pushing for maybe like higher percentage of female ownership or BIPOC ownership, and the ways we're approaching terms like empowerment and the ways that we deal with the producers we work with, and the way we talk about them and the way we tell their stories. And that's all sort of changing and being rethought as things are moving forward. So not that it's necessarily a challenge, but I think it's an interesting thing to see as it's unfolding, just, the way fair trade used to be and versus the way it is now and the way it's moving forward.
I think this is a great question, because inside fair trade, I'm very lucky to have an incredible team, most of them women, who are always supporting and very supportive also. And I feel like I have a lot of support inside the organization, but sometimes, well, the barrier for me is that fair trade is trying to make changes in industries that are very conservative. Here in Mexico, for example, most of the farms, or in other countries of Latin America, the cooperatives are owned by men. And sometimes it's very hard for me, or they don't feel very comfortable with a young woman that is leading the team or setting the parameters of how things have to work. And sometimes that is a very big challenge to engage them with the program, to even sometimes to make things. So this is something we keep working on, not only the impact team, the rest of the team keep working on changing that, on like finding the ways of making it easier for everyone and change the system in some parts. So that are one of the main challenges for me.
So I am a student, so I don't really have a perspective on the work part of it. But especially as I've gotten older, I've kind of noticed that men are like listened to more and taken more seriously, and their ideas are taken into account more in classroom settings and other school settings, and even like family settings. People just tend to listen to them more and take them more seriously. So it's always been I've always kind of made a point to raise my voice, get my ideas out there, and just make sure that my voice is heard, because I have things to say just like everybody else. So I think that's super important, is just to be listened to even when it's not too easy, and people listen to men more, I think, usually.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because our follow-up question is kind of what advice do you have for, women that are experiencing these barriers in their line of work?
One of the most important things for me is trust yourself. Sometimes they are trying to question your decision or your request, and it's very important that you or we learn to be flexible and negotiate, but never doubt ourselves, because that is very important. If you are confident on what you're saying, that also like draw a line that you know what you're talking about, and that also increase the respect they are feeling for what you're doing.
Yeah, I would definitely say, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. And like Aime said, confidence is really key. It's easy to start doubting yourself when people push back against you or start ignoring you, or just make you feel in any way like you're doubting what you know, but you know what you know, and just feel right in that, and don't be afraid to keep saying it, and as well, stand up for other people who might not be as outspoken or might be a little afraid to have that advocacy for themselves, and make them feel confident, and network with the people you're working with, have each other's backs and have that support, because sometimes you may need it, sometimes they may need it, but having that support on all sides is going to help when it's a really difficult situation, if it's needed.
I like in my industry here in the US, coming from a brand owner perspective, I think it's really important to understand how the system works, even if we don't like it. I think I've always been one to kind of try to create change from the inside out, because we want it to be sustainable. We want to develop respect. And even if it's with people maybe who are old school, like industry leaders, I do think sometimes we're required to work with what we have within the system, and then we can try to gradually encourage others to make changes. I definitely believe in having advisors and mentors and peer resources who we can turn to, especially, if anyone's an entrepreneur here, it can, I guess for anyone, there are times that are lonely, that we can feel kind of, especially if we really are change agents. We want things to be different. It can be incredibly frustrating. It can be lonely. It can be, there are hard days. So having that network of support means everything, men and women, right? And so I really value having like other brand owners, especially women, I can turn to. And then also, sometimes it is like the older man who I need to, reach to, like he's been through the whole thing, right? He's worked through all the distributors and the grocery stores and is retired, and, they have wisdom too to offer. So I guess that would be my advice. And just, I don't see anything as a barrier. I see it as an opportunity to create change. And I really think it starts with the mindset and the perspective that we bring to any situation. So I do a lot of daily work on just keeping that, the mindset that I know I need to have to really be successful.
I think that
Oh,
kind
sorry.
of what they were, I'm sorry, just kind of what everybody was saying though. I think that confidence and standing up for yourself is a really crucial part of it, because if you don't believe in yourself, if you don't believe in what you're saying, then no one's going to take you seriously. No one's going to listen to you or respect your ideas. So you have to believe in yourself first, and then everyone else will follow your lead.
Sorry about that, Ava, but I really, really love those answers. Those are amazing. This question is directed towards Sara, Aime, and Alyssa. What do you feel are some of the biggest issues that women producers and artisans face?
one of the biggest challenges for female farmers is land ownership. A lot of times they work a lot in the farms and they are not as recognized as men. They sometimes are not allowed to be the owners of the land they are working. And in other cases, they can't afford it. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges they are facing. Also because of that, like they are not in paper the owners of the land. Sometimes they don't receive trainings or are not able to receive that trainings on how to improve production or best practices or things like that, or have access to credits or things like that. So I think that is one of the most important challenges they face. And I think another thing in the side of workers is of female workers is the vulnerable situation in the workspaces. For example, for migrant workers that go from a different side, like to from where they live to this side where they need to work. Sometimes even the language, it's a very it's a barrier, and we need to create safe spaces for them to be able to do something basic as work.
That's
Go
Sarah.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a lot of my work with producers is more indirect, with being with the FTF, but from a lot of what I see, a lot, probably the majority of artisans, producers, suppliers who are women are also mothers. So a lot of what I see when our members are talking about their programs and the building capacity that they're doing with the people they work with, it's never or it's frequently not just about the women. It's the woman, and she's sending her children to school, and she's buying them food, and she's buying them laptops and things like that. So frequently the discussion about the benefits that the work that's being provided does, it immediately, when the worker is a woman, it kind of implicitly goes to the children, which that is part of being a parent, of course. But I think in general, I mean, even in here, here in the US, the expectation when you're a mother is you're not taking care of yourself first. And that shouldn't necessarily be the case. Not to, of course, to say that you shouldn't take care of your children, but it's the focus when you're a mother that immediately no one's as worried about you or not as focused on you because you have children as well. So I think that's something I see a lot is, this immediate shift of focus on the capacity building that's being done. And I had something else to say, but I completely forgot. So Sarah, go ahead.
All right, let me know if you think of it. Yeah, I agree. So the land ownership is huge, right? In Rwanda, the genocide happened in 1994, and many men died. Many people, many men and women died during that time. So the women who survived and had land with their husbands at that time actually amazingly could not even use the land. The land that their family had was taken because technically women still could not own property. So they weren't even allowed to continue to farm on that land without paying rent. So it was only a couple of years later, lots of people advocated for them, and they were able to own land within the next 5 years. But that's very recent. So that's definitely a big issue. And then also just the ability to leave. So many of them are working on the land, the tea farmers, most of the tea pluckers are women, but they don't necessarily have the same freedom again, this is going to the cultural issues as well. Like they don't have the same freedom or sense of safety to leave and sell and to negotiate, because most of the people they'll be negotiating with are other men. So it tends to be like the man will then take the product and go do the selling and negotiating, and often take the earnings and go to the bar. And so yes, most of the women are mothers. And so we're seeing, like at Sorwate, they have this amazing, kind of getting into the fair trade solution now, but they have an amazing porridge program that they started in 2016. And so now the women are able to drop their children and babies off at this, it's called a creche. It's like a nursery daycare. And the children are taken care of safely. They have like a play environment with trained people, and they're given porridge. So they have meals, and the women are able to then go to work and feel assured that their children are being taken care of. Whereas before, sometimes they would only be able to work like 7 days out of the month because they were so worried about their children, or they would leave their children in the forest and be afraid of, what's going to happen to them. So that safety factor, the mother care, because women are still responsible for all of the housework as well, the cooking, the cleaning. Sometimes it can take all day just to collect water for their cooking at night. So just that balancing act is very challenging in most of the world still. And then I think having, accessing loans, accessing capital is very difficult. So if they wanted to expand their farm or get better rates on things, that's tough for women to do alone, at least in Rwanda. And Rwanda is a country that is made up of over 50% of their government is female, which is very unusual. So it's come a long ways, but there's still a lot that needs to happen there. And I'm really talking more about what I know of the tea industry in Rwanda.
Thank you, guys. One last question, and this is for everyone. How do you feel like fair trade advocates for women?
Once I had the chance to talk with some farmers of Amprocal, and Amprocal is a coffee cooperative in Honduras that is run by women, only women, and this is huge. I was very excited to hear about them. Delaney is the director and founder of Amprocal, and she was a member of a coffee cup run by men, but she was never allowed to take decisions, and she decided to start her own cup, and she started with another 8 female farmers. And one of the first challenges they faced, it was the cultural barrier. They wanted to increase increase the number of female farmers that were part of this COP, and they faced a cultural barrier that men were not very comfortable with their wives representing their families in a cooperative, and they had to do a lot of work about that. Raise awareness, have workshops with men, to make them understand that it was the right of the woman of the community to have access to property, to work and have an income, and that would also increase the well-being of the families. And the second barrier they faced was coffee buyers. They were not used to make business with women, and there were a lot of assumptions that women didn't know how to produce quality coffee. And in 2014, they certified their coffee, as a fair trade product, and they found a market that was willing to pay a fair price for the coffee they were producing. And also, with the money of the premium, they started to train more women, train them in productivity. And also they were providing finance education and microcredits to the female farmers, and that allowed them to buy their own land. And they even have their own coffee shop in Honduras. And now they are 140 farmers, and 102 own the land. They are landowners. So that was very incredible for me, how they started to work, and that with the premium funds, they were able to build more capacity in the female farmers, and also give them this opportunity to buy a land that they can work, and it's going to be of their own.
I think what I would add to that is just to expand a bit more on the program that I mentioned at Sororite with the crush and maintaining those safe spaces. That's definitely a project that's come out of the Fair Trade Premium. A question that I had, and it wasn't answered in time for this call, but I'm still wondering what the gender makeup is of the cooperatives in terms of their voting rights. So I'm curious, like the Fair Trade Premium is incredibly beneficial to the community, but I'm not sure if everyone's vote is equal. I believe it is. And I know that the community where I work in Rwanda, they've voted on things like that. They also have a hospital now. They have a soccer field for the children. They have a library with an internet cafe and different things in the community. So I think that's really helped. Also just maintaining, tea is always fluctuating, the price for tea. So maintaining that price floor in addition to the premium, so they know at least the minimum they're going to be getting paid, is super important. And then again, back to the working mother, just having regulated working hours, days and hours that are required by, in meeting the standards. And then having access to special community funds. I know that in Rwanda, there's some special projects happening with gender equality committees, which is really exciting, and more training for household financial empowerment. So more women are being offered training to understand how finances do work, so they can be empowered to participate in their household finances, because that still tends to be controlled by the men in that culture, the finances and the land. Yeah.
Sarah, I love that you're asking those questions of the people you work with, because that's something we deal with a lot, talking to our members about, what questions are you asking? And sometimes those conversations can be kind of uncomfortable and kind of difficult, but it's so important to have them. So I love that you're doing that. I think, really generally fair trade, I think it in a lot of different ways provides pathways towards agency. And that can look like, understanding pricing so that a woman producer she knows the value of her labor and make sure that she's getting paid a fair amount for what she's doing. We had this whole session at the FTF conference last year that was so interesting with Ann Kelly from Mayan Hands about weepiles, and how those are sort of, they're these deeply significant cultural items that take, the really ornate ones, hundreds of hours in some cases to produce. And they're just getting, kind of taken and sold for pennies on the dollar. And then, sold for, you might be able to buy them at a market for, I don't know, $20 for something that might have taken 100 hours to make. So of course that woman who this item is so significant to her and took so much time and love, really, she's not getting compensated for it fairly. So, providing, the tools so that they know what to ask for what they're creating, and they're making a fair amount. And, that's just one example. It can be so many different things, taking part in the design process and making sure that their designs are representative of their culture while not appropriating it at the same time. So yeah, I think fair trade just in a lot of different ways as an umbrella term just provides pathways towards people feeling like they have the ability to be part of those conversations and stand up for themselves.
I think that so many people who work in these industries where their labor is being taken advantage of every day are women. And so I think that that just in itself fair trade empowers women because it provides opportunities for everyone who's working in those fields. And then it can give women opportunities that they didn't have before, especially if they live in countries where women do not have the same rights as men. In the US, we're getting there, we're pretty good about that, but so many places women can't receive an education, they have to work really young, or they can't vote. They just have so many or a lack of opportunities that men do have. So I think that fair trade can help provide those for them.
Definitely. Well, if we don't have any more questions in the chat, we can end this at 6 o'clock on the dot. But I just want to thank you all so much again for coming. These answers and this discussion was amazing and definitely eye-opening for me. So yeah, if anyone does have any more questions, thank you guys so much for coming. This was awesome.